This video will go over the traits of Paranthropus boisei. This is considered a robust Australopithecine. The first feature we will discuss is the frontal region. This is the area of the skull directly behind the brow ridge. In this particular fossil, the frontal region is long and low. Most species will be long and low, including this species. The next feature that we will discuss is the supraorbital ridge. This is the ridge of bone that is directly above the orbits, or the eye sockets. In Paranthropus boisei, we see a pronounced or a prominent supraorbital ridge or torus. The next feature that we will look at is called postorbital constriction. So postorbital constriction refers to how far does the frontal region of the skull pinch in behind the brow. Is it slight, moderate, or extreme? We see an extreme degree in species that have a smaller frontal region of the brain. The next feature that we will discuss is the sagittal crest. This is the ridge of bone that runs directly down the center of the skull and is the attachment point for the jaw or the temporalis muscles. We see a sagittal crest in species that consume a diet of rough food items. This slide here shows yet another view of the sagittal crest. This is the sagittal crest from the lateral view or view from the side. So we see this feature, the sagittal crest, the ridge of bone running down the center of the skull. Here's another view of the sagittal crest. We can see it here from the posterior or a view from the back. So again, this is a feature found in species that consume a diet of tough food items and have extreme pressure on the chewing muscles. The next feature that we will discuss is the zygomatic arch or flare. The zygomatic flare is how far outward do the cheekbones flare. Is it slight, moderate, or extreme? In this view, the zygomatic flare is extreme, shown here in the anterior view. In this slide, we look at the same feature. We're still looking at zygomatic flare, but we're looking from another angle. Now we're looking from a superior or a view from above. The zygomatic flare here is extreme, and we can see this in species with diets of rough food items. In this slide, we see another view of zygomatic flare. We're now looking at zygomatic flare from an inferior view or a view from below. We see an extreme degree of flare in species with powerful jaw muscles that must tuck underneath the zygomatic bones and then attach the sagittal crest. One more view of the zygomatic flare. So same feature here, we're looking at the zygomatic flare, but now we're looking at it from a lateral or a view from the side. So we see an extreme amount of flare here. So we see extreme degree of flare in species with powerful jaw muscles and eat a diet of rough food items. In this slide, we'll look at a feature called the degree of facial prognathism. So prognathism refers to how far does the midface and jaw region project outward. Is it slight, moderate, or extreme? And we see a moderate degree here with P. boisei. This slide also looks at the degree of facial prognathism. So the degree of prognathism here is moderate, looking at a lateral view or a view from the side. So we see prognathism will decrease once we get into genus Homo. In this slide, we're looking at a feature called the ramus. So the ramus is where the jaw will attach to the rest of the skull. A deep ramus is shown here from the lateral view, and we see a deep ramus in species that consume a rougher, tougher diet. This slide here highlights the size of the incisors. The incisors are the teeth in the front of the mouth. So here we see smaller incisors in comparison to the molars. This slide here shows you the size of the molars, or the back teeth. The molars of P. boisei are 4 times the size of what we would see in modern Homo sapiens. Massive molars are found in species with a diet of mainly rough, tough vegetation and requires a lot of chewing. In this slide, we see another view of the molars. We now see a view of the molars from the inferior view or a view from below looking up. So we see here that the molars are massive in comparison to the incisors. In this slide here, we see a measurement of the foramen magnum to the posterior of the skull. So the foramen magnum is the opening where the vertebral column will connect to the cranium. So we see a rough measurement of the foramen magnum to the back of the skull here. In this slide, we see a measurement of the foramen magnum, or the opening, all the way to the front of the skull. So you see here that the measurement from the foramen magnum to the front is much longer in comparison to the last slide, which was the foramen magnum to the posterior of the skull. And the last feature we'll look at is the position of maximum skull breadth. So that's the widest point of the skull viewed from the back. In this species, in P. boisei, we see the maximum skull breadth is at the base of the skull. A special thank you to Bone Clones and Los Angeles Valley College Anthropology If you are interested in this bone clones model, you can get it at www.boneclones.com.